the antinatalism thing.
Hmm.
You've got any thoughts on antinatalism, Steve?
Yeah, lots. Yeah, I thought about antinatalism a lot. Uh, um, it was one of the first things that came to my mind when I was thinking about veganism. So, like,
Mm.
when I was younger, I was thinking about animal welfare, and I was thinking about, like, what is a good life, what constitutes a good life, and that's something that comes up, of course, in the vegan dialogue, because there's an idea that you can justify it, and maybe you can, if you can show that there's greater fruits out of like breeding animals and whatnot. And then antinatalism is stuck with me. It's been a really difficult thing for me to knock, and I think philosophically it's sound.
Hmm.
I really, really struggle with it, and so when it comes to justifying having children, I think that the way that that can be done is if you elevate your values for other things above the reasoning in antinatalism. If you just run on the premises of antinatalism, I think it's very sound. So yeah, it's
Hmm.
something I struggle with actually. But I'm not interested in having children anyway, so I'm good. What about you?
Yeah. Well, like you mean like not interested personally or like ethically?
Uh, I think personally, and so that affords me not to think about it ethically. Um,
Hmm.
but like we're all humans, right? Like I know that if I really wanted children, I'd find a way to convince myself that maybe I can have one. There's
Hmm.
two of us, and if we have one child, at least I'm doing my bit. Like there's
Yeah, sure, sure.
humans are very capable of doing that, and it doesn't matter how reasonable they are as well. So that's probably be the way that I went. But if I was to have children, I'd adopt. That's what I'd do.
Yeah, because that's the other thing is like it's difficult if you, especially if you're like a consequentialist or something, to justify having a child when, like, not just on antinatalist considerations, but just on the consideration that there are children currently who need adopting. And by having a child,
Mhm.
you're basically saying, I am willing to raise a child, and
Yeah.
yet you sort of create a new one instead of taking one that's already in need. I mean, I'd love to have children. I think there is something inexplicably beautiful about having your own children,
There seems to be, yeah.
um, which I don't think can be fully comprehended until. I mean, here's me saying it's great, and here's you saying you're not interested. I don't think either of us can fully comprehend what it means until it happens, if it happens. So it's
But
difficult.
that's
It's a
often what
difficult kind of
happens with the
conversation to
dialogue.
have.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's like often with the dialogue, like when someone says to me, my wife gets it a lot more than me. They go, "When are you having children?" Whereas I don't get it as much. I think that's just a sex thing.
Sure.
Um, but like when we're asked like, "Why don't you have children?" and you explain, "I just don't want them." The justifications come through, and I'm not knocking it. Antinatalism is a difficult one. People can get very upset about it very quickly, and I
Mm.
understand why. But it's one of those ones where it's a big pile of shit. Don't step in it. So let me step in it. Um, when when that's coming up, normally the justifications are it's yeah, but you feel amazing about like this life that you brought into the world. And it's like all the antinatalist is going to be hearing is yeah, you benefit. It's selfish.
Hmm.
Yeah, but like you get to like give them these opportunities, and it's like yeah, but you're rolling the dice for them. What if they actually have to go through their life pretending that they were basically happy with? Because that's the other thing. Once you're born, do the best of with the cards that you've been dealt. But like you can have this nagging thinking in your head of like, really, you know, uh, it's inconsequential. May have been better that I wasn't born. Um, but I don't know, man. Sometimes I think this is just too much philosophy. It's it's uh it's definitely
Yeah,
one of those
it's
ones that
it's
you can
it's true. I
upset people
mean,
quite quickly.
I think David Benatar in particular, his version of antinatalism, I'm not convinced by the asymmetry thing. Like, I'm not sure that. I mean, he says that
Can you
when you
remind me
don't,
of that? Is that
if you don't exist, like if you don't exist or don't exist yet, the fact that you're not suffering is good, but the fact that you're not experiencing pleasure isn't bad.
yeah, I
He
agree with
thinks,
you. Yeah,
you know,
that's
and I'm like, I kind of. But the thing is, he justifies it on intuitions. Like he says,
mhm.
there's no one on Mars right now. Is it bad? Do we like think, oh, how terrible it is that there aren't people up there like enjoying themselves? No, we don't care. But is it good that there's no suffering?
Mhm.
Yeah, it feels like maybe actually, yeah. And so maybe it's like for those who don't exist, it's good that they don't suffer, but it's not bad that they don't experience pleasure. If that's the case, then for those who don't exist yet as children, it doesn't matter how much pleasure or suffering you have in your life. Before you exist, the pleasure counts for nothing, the suffering counts for everything. The only thing you consider is the suffering, and therefore
Mhm.
it's bad to do. He then, in like the next chapter, says, even though, like, okay, so it doesn't matter, even if your life is filled with pleasure, it's still not worth having children. But then his next chapter is like, and here's why your life is actually more filled with suffering, and how your life is actually going worse than even you think it is, right? So it's quite a depressing book, quite sobering, but I think it's a wonderful work of philosophy. Like, it's very challenging, very interesting.
No,
It
it
talks about
is. It is
disability,
good.
has a really interesting detour on disability, the philosophy of disability and what it means to be disabled. I mean, are we all disabled because we don't have wings? You know, like that. If we lived in a world in which we all sort of had wings, and you didn't have any wings, you'd feel disabled. Okay, so if everybody whose legs functioned today died, would people who remained alive but didn't have functioning legs still be considered disabled?
Yeah.
Like, probably
That's
not
an,
after some time. And so, like, in principle, there's a kind of there are all kinds of disabilities that we're suffering from. You know,
mm,
it's a really, really fascinating work. But
that is. Yeah.
I'm not sure
The,
I'm.
the arguments I found a bit more compelling on that front is like it's when it's put it into like a metaphor. So suppose this is going to be a bit of a butcher of one, but like suppose that
Hmm.
you've got a sniper rifle and you've got to fire into a
Mm-hmm.
forest,
Mm-hmm.
and there's someone there that's starving, and if you do it right, and say there's a 92% chance of you doing it right, you'll hit the lock, it will break out, and the food will be everywhere, and this person will eat and they'll live, and yay. But there's an
Mm-hmm.
8% chance that you're going to hit them. It's not a great metaphor, but in philosophy they rarely are, and they're always about killing someone as
Mm-hmm.
well. Um,
Yeah.
in that case, it's like if you ask people, would you take the shot, and you've got a choice not to, you get like a set amount saying yes or no. But then if you
Mm-hmm.
remove the fact that they're going to suffer if you can't open the lock, would you just take the shot anyway? And it's very hard to justify an 8% chance of bringing in a life that has a
Mm.
miserable experience. And it's like, at what point are you doing that, and why are you doing it? Because you're doing it explicitly because you want the children. um
Yeah.
like, I have a bit more truck with that kind of reasoning. But it's, yeah, antinatalism is one of the harder ones I've come across myself.
Yeah.
It's, I'm not
Um,
definitive on anything, but yeah.
Ahmed Sami has just commented. I've come to believe that antinatalism is one of, if not the most noble and selfless philosophies out there. It's true, a lot of people want to have kids, and if you are convinced that it's wrong, then to manage to sort of philosophize yourself out of doing it is
Yeah.
pretty is pretty special. Okay,